So, welcome everyone. I think, does anybody know everyone around the table? I know, Nina, have you had the opportunity to? Good. All right. Well, that's easy. So I'll call it to order. The first item that we need to is a chair of the group and minute taker. So, do we have anyone that is interested or any nominations for a chair?
It's okay with everybody. I would like to nominate Trevor here. North Erie did call the meeting. I'm not going to chair because I see a bit of a conflict of interest there because I am also the spokesman for North Erie, so it would be difficult for me to do both jobs. Trevor is the vice read, so I feel that he would be in a good position to do the job, and I'm sure we're all familiar with Trevor. If that's okay with everyone.
So, for any of
Nominate
for
Trevor.
chair?
Yep.
Second? Everyone's in favor? And second item there is minute taker.
Now, I'm just going to touch bases on that again. The reason I think we should have a minute taker as well, because I'm 64 and I can't remember anything the next morning, and I like to sit down and read through the minutes from previous meetings. I think it will all keep us straight and narrow, so I was wondering if we could have a minute keeper, whether it be one of the CAOs, or maybe we could have one of our clerks come in and do it. Can I just throw that out there, get thoughts about that?
I think one of the CEOs could do it, couldn't he?
Yeah. Volunteer from either one of you, or?
I'll nominate Trevor.
Okay. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Okay, so with that, we'll take the confirmation of the agenda. So do I have somebody to move the confirmation of the agenda? Anita will move that. Is there somebody to second it? Jim seconds it. Morris Turnberry? All those in favor? Carried. Is there any declaration of peculiar interest? Not seeing any. So opening remarks by Reed Bailey and Mayor Heffer. So I will turn it over to Reed Bailey for his opening remarks.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. I would like to put a special thank you out to Morris Turnberry for agreeing to meet with us. I did talk openly about my desire to make agreements with our neighbors. And I feel there's different directions we can go in. There's a bit of an urgency while we're at the table tonight, and that is because of the termination on September 1st of the cross-border agreements. And I'm looking at this as I'm hoping if you folks are interested in talking with us about this and not just, we're not sure we want to talk, I hope we're going to have an open dialogue. I look at it from a point of view that we could consider amalgamation. We could consider contracts. We can consider tax sharing. We can consider cost recovery, buy or sell with each other. We could consider land transfer agreements, or a combination of some or all of the above. We have a lot of agreements with you folks. I'm not sure if everybody's sure how many, so I'm just going to read them off here so we all have an understanding. We have the cross-border agreement with Morris Turnberry. We have a property standards bylaw enforcement with Morris Turnberry. We have a fire suppression service with Morris Turnberry. We have an amendment to the Belgrade Water System agreement with Morris Turnberry. We have an amendment to a cross-border service agreement with Morris Turnberry. Cross-border services agreement with Morris Turnberry 99 to 2018. Cross-border service policy. Repair of Victoria Street Bridge with Morris Turnberry. Belgrade Water System with Morris Turnberry 74 to 2018. Quick claim transfer deeds with Morris Turnberry. Agreement with Morris Turnberry installing of fire hydrants. Agreement with Morris Turnberry regarding Greens Meat Market map tour. Agreement with cross-border agreement with Morris Turnberry, MNR. agreement with Morris Turnberry, RA Water Main Extension on Corn Street. Agreement with Morris Turnberry installing fire hydrants. Boundary adjustments with Morris Turnberry. That's in there twice, so there must be 2 of them. Recreation funding agreement with Morris Turnberry, MNR. So we have a lot of agreements through the years. There's been a lot of agreements, and we've always worked pretty well together. So I would like to see if we can maybe streamline that. But my sole purpose is, or the main purpose for Reeve Bailey from the Reeves chair, is that we have to make it feasible for both communities. We need to be able to say to the people that put us in the positions we're in that we have agreements that work for both sides. We've done it in the past. The cross-service border agreement, it did expire on a year ago. So on September 1st a year ago, neither side came forward and said we'd like to renew this. Having said that, that's normal for an agreement of this size to have a 4 or 5 year run and then sit down and have a discussion of what went right, what went wrong, where we can tweak, where we should leave it alone. Because it's expired, I'm hoping to hear tonight that Morris Turnberry would be interested in talking to us about continuing that and talking about that so we can move forward. So if we can start with that in a public meeting, and then I feel the rest of the meeting should be private. I'm not sure how Jamie feels, but I do remember the fire department meetings we had and the fiasco in the public input and the misconception and misconstrued things that went out in the public. It just was a fiasco, and I think we can do this in a business forum, in a proper manner, if we go in behind closed doors. I am not a person that likes to negotiate in public. I believe it's just a terrible way to negotiate. Jamie, I will hand it over to you now.
Mayor Heffer?
Yes, just a moment. Okay, thank you for the opportunity for Morris Turnberry to be here. And we're here this evening at the request of North Huron, and we welcome the opportunity to do so, to be able to sit down and talk with their neighbors. And as Reeve Bailey did explain and demonstrate very clearly by that long list of agreements that we have, that we do work together. And in my opinion, we work well together. And it's my intent that that relationship continues. It's absolutely important for the economic and social health of the community that we share that we do have a good working relationship. And Morris Turnberry, just so that you are well aware, is committed to maintaining that relationship. So just to get that out there and very clear that we work well together, and my goal is that that would continue. Reeve Bailey mentioned that the agreement expired a year ago. And I guess that I'm not quite sure I agree with that statement, but however, we question why we are here right now. We had these discussions a year ago, and there was a consensus reached at that time. That agreement was acceptable, and both municipalities wanted to continue with it in place. It was signed in November of 2018, and the intent was that that agreement would be in place for the next 5 years. As we're well aware, water and sewer systems are intended to be user-pay systems, and we are committed to making sure that the users of the system, who are Morris Turnberry residents, are paying their fair share. If adjustments are necessary, we are willing to make these changes. And unless there's new information since we met a year ago, we're just not aware of what those changes would be. And if there is new information, then our question would be, why have we not seen any new information come forward? Morris Turnberry has asked in writing on 2 occasions for North Huron to provide information or example agreements to show what changes could be proposed, and we have not received that information. So, we're coming into this meeting a little bit blind, just not knowing what you're proposing. And we would like to point out that we feel it would have been very helpful in preparing for a productive discussion this evening to have been given that information ahead of time. So here we are, and we're sitting around the table with the agenda before us, and so we'll take this opportunity to listen to what changes you may propose so that we may take that information back to our respective council.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Heffer. So we'll move on to the status of the existing cross-border services agreement. Bailey?
I can speak to that. I'm not aware of any agreements last November to extend this. That's the first I've heard of that. I was looking at number 32, and it says this agreement will come into effect on the date that it is signed, and the last of the parties that shall terminate on September 1st, 2019, unless each party provides notice in writing to the contrary at least 1 year in advance of the first of any subsequent termination date, which would be a year ago Sunday, which would be the council before our council. I'm not sure if November fell in the lame duck or what happened. I wasn't on council at the time, so maybe somebody could fill me in on that. The other thing we have to both recognize, Jamie and I'm sure we do, that we have new staff. It's not the staff that was on for years, so they weren't aware of this either. And it's because we started looking at the agreements from a North Huron point of view that we came across this. I'm not sure if anybody at the table can fill me in on that.
Who else was on the board? Who else was on that committee when they did that agreement?
In
Or
our
was it shared
council,
service committee, was it not?
yeah,
The only people that left.
There were two left,
Me
Trevor
and
and
Jake.
myself, yes. You remember that last November?
So what I remember in last November is a discussion that took place in this room as it relates to the Brightspan expansion, and question about issues pertaining to that expansion, and about the conversation about Schedule F, which was the discussion about the money that Morris Turnberry provides North Huron as it relates to the soft services, rec department, cemetery, that perspective. And the conversation that was that Morris Turnberry had a legal opinion that we couldn't continue to have that in the agreement because it was basically the intention of that clause in the agreement was thought to be that we were holding you ransom for the services of water to the properties that border North Huron and Morris Turnberry. Nowhere in that agreement, or nowhere was there a discussion about whether the existing agreement, from the perspective of the entire committee, nothing came from that meeting that went back to the existing councils at the time, and nothing was put in writing by either one that I'm aware of, at least from our North Huron Council, that we would put in writing that the contract should continue. That's how it's read, and I don't believe our previous council received, from a staff perspective, we never seen it from a council perspective that anything was received from Morris Turnberry stating that the agreement was one to continue. So that is what I recall based on that meeting that we had, that was chaired by Chris Watson, I believe, from Huron County. So there wasn't anything in my mind. We left there. I think there was definitely some information that both Morris Turnberry and North Huron didn't agree with about what was going on and how the agreement proceeded. But there was nothing that came back in writing that would have stated that the agreement should continue.
I guess, Trevor, I was of the assumption that bylaw number 99, 2018 was what extended this agreement to continue for the next 5 years.
can I ask if that was a Morris Turnberry or a
No,
North Huron?
That was a North
That
Huron
was
bylaw.
bylaw.
Do we have that by?
But I think that, so let me make sure I understand. So the intention though is that meeting in November, the reason why we did this bylaw was to add the property for Brightspan. That property wasn't on the list of properties that was on Circle A. So that's what we added. That's the only thing we added, that I recall. We didn't change anything else in the agreement. So the only thing that, in November, the only thing that we had for discussion at the table was regards to the Brightspan development and the concerns that Morris Turnberry said that there was issue with that development because it got held up or whatever the case may be, and that's why the meeting was called. And then we came back and that amendment was the amendment to Schedule A, which was to add the Brightspan new development to it, to add them to the water.
Okay, so I just, when we had those discussions, Trevor, I guess I was of the assumption that the intent was that the agreement was renewed with that amendment taking place. So certainly a difference of understanding what we did at that time. So I'm not going to dwell on it. It's just certainly a different take than I had back last November when that amendment was taking place. I was of the assumption that that amendment was rescheduling and setting things forward for the next 5 years.
So,
Pre-Bailey?
so can I ask if those 3 hookups have been used then? If it was an emergency for the last council to do it in November, I believe that is lame duck, to make that decision and move that forward. Are those 3 hookups being used now or are they still neutral? Does anyone know? Could we get that for the next meeting to know whether those 3 are used or not?
I think what might be prudent is that those minutes of that meeting that Chris Watson had prepared might be best to be redistributed amongst this committee so that not that we're going to dwell on it, Mayor Heffer, I think it's just a matter of let's understand what exactly took place in that meeting and what discussions were had, and then we'll take that information as we see it now today on how we're going to move forward.
Well, with where we're at today, Deputy Reeves, that it's a moot point anyway. So we're here now looking at renewing an agreement. So
Yep.
I don't want to dwell on it. It's just that was my recollection. That
Okay.
was dealt with for 5 years.
Okay. Okay, so based on the information that we have, the agreement, Morris Turnberry's of the opinion that it was renewed. North Huron's of the opinion that it ceased. I guess at the end of the day, from what I'm hearing, are we on page where we're okay to discuss renegotiating of the agreement? Is where I come from that.
I believe we're at the place where that's the next step.
Okay.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that we're not going down a path that okay, so, yep, so Reed Bailey.
So if I could, I think where we'd like to start is with the cross-border agreement. We all know that it started out as a fantastic venture, and a lot of communities watched. We all know the stumbling blocks that we came upon. But there's a lot of pieces to that are worth saving. And then we have, 20 other agreements that I think we should try to work into it so that, and I would prefer to have a 99-year agreement, renewable every 8 or 9 years. I think it's not fair to councillors to have to do this every 4 years. I think the training wheels are off, and Jamie and Trevor will speak more to this as we move on because they were the participating parties at the beginning. What I would personally like to see, or what my council would also like to see, is putting together something that's viable for all of us, makes sense to all of us, something that we can go out to our prospective communities and say, we're working together and it works for all of us, and incorporate a lot of this stuff into it, which will take a lot of work, unfortunately, for the CAOs and our staff. But I think it's time, I personally think it's time to move on with it. Having said that, I think we should start right with the cross-border agreement. We should come back with changes that we would both like, both communities like. Have a look at it and see what we can work out. We did not bring a list forward because we wanted to see, first of all, if you were interested, because we all felt that it was just a slip, just a mistake, change in staffing, that September 1st, 2018 slipped by. We've not for a moment thought that Morris Turnbury was not interested in working with us. So right out on the table, that's how I feel and my council feels about it. So I wonder if we could just start with that at the next meeting and start to go through that. I do not expect this to be a 3-meeting deal. We are making changes for the future of both of our communities. We will be talking to our council, of course, and we'll be going back and talking to ourselves. And I think we should all take small steps, go back to our councils, take the time to think it out. And again, I'm not against a 99-year lease and with clauses in it, but not a clause that says if you forget, it's done. That's done. And I understand that's what they do in a lot of circumstances. But I believe that our two communities can now move forward in a bigger span. And I'll ask you, Jamie, your thoughts on that.
Just a couple of things, Reed Bailey, on that. The cross-border agreement, and I think as we're seeing, and the reason why we're here now is, I believe, very cumbersome and difficult and confusing to navigate. And what we need now is a water and sewer agreement. That's what's lacking, and so that's, to me, the item of most importance, and to me that's first priority, is that we deal with a water and sewer agreement, get that in place, and work at the next one, and at the next level, and the next one after that. That's my opinion. Our examples with agreements we have with other municipalities is you deal with the item at hand, make an agreement that is well suited to that item. It's done, everybody understands it, it's clear and concise, and you move on to your next whatever it is. And a little bit on this agreement, and I think which has caused probably the confusion here, is it's an awkward read. And particularly that paragraph that I think is causing the confusion. The paragraph contradicts itself in that it's successive periods of 5 years automatic renewal, and it has a bit of an awkward read in there that seems to be interpreted outside the scope of the intent of what was meant there. I don't believe there's any other agreement that we've ever had that you have to notify with intent to continue. That's just, to me, that's unheard of in any kind of agreement. The notification comes with intent to adjust or change, or when the scope changes, notification's made and you deal with that. But this is the only agreement that I've ever seen that you need to make notification of continuance. So I think that there's a real awkwardness, and I do believe that paragraph contradicts itself, and the intent is very clear to me as I read it, that it was renewed for an automatic renewal of 5 years. So just, that's my comments on that, Reed Bailey. So I'm a little bit apprehensive of considering a cross-border agreement with many facets to it. I think we would be far better situated to address the issue at hand, which is water and sewer, get it tidied up, deal with it in a concise way, and whatever other agreements, we can discuss those and sit down and work our way through those, whatever those issues may be. But I'm a firm believer that keep it very concise and detailed to the item at hand. So that would be my thought on that.
Reed Bailey?
Yeah, just to follow up on what you said, I totally agree with you. And even in this list, we have the Belgrade water system. And I think I seen one other place where it was talking about a water agreement. So here we are, water main extension to Corn. This should, and hydrants and that, it should all be we can do away with 3 of them right there by putting them into this agreement. It's water, it's piping. We're not gonna run a pipe down Corn Street without putting a hydrant in it. And we're not gonna do it on Arthur Street either, so I'm not sure why there's a separate. And this is also, a lot of this is brought to us by our staff going, this is so confusing, because every time we think we got it figured out, we come across another agreement. Going back and back and back. So I think it's just a matter of bringing everything up to modernize it and bring it up to now, to this point. So I appreciate that, and I agree we should start right with the cross-border agreement. I would also suggest that our CAOs do some background work on this so that we're not, I mean, there's a lot of things that are common sense. A lot of things that I'm sure that they could work and talk, and Jamie, you could talk to your CAO and I'll talk to Dwayne and move things back and forth and around a bit so that when we have our next meeting, we have some substance of what we want to talk about. A lot of us do have day jobs as well as the council that we're on, so we do have staff that can do that. So I think they could look into a lot of this, and the people that work for us and say, well, this and this and this would be better. And then we'll get down to the nitty gritty where is it feasible for us to move forward together? And we as a council, two council reps will, two council groups will work on that part of it, if that's okay with you.
Certainly, it's certainly our preferred methodology on these things is for staff to take the lead and work things out, and when they have something with some kind of form and shape to it, they bring that back to council. And I think if you recall the written response we gave at the start, we expressed that we thought that was probably the first steps we should have taken as we went down this road. So, absolutely, I think it's imperative that staff takes the lead on this and starts to work things out.
Okay, so I'm hearing we have a consensus on what we're gonna do with regards to the status, and I've also heard some discussion of options of how we're dealing with the cross-border services agreement from both Reed Bailey as well as Mayor Heffer, is that correct?
I'm fine with that.
Based that the staff are gonna take some type of the lead and provide direction to this committee as well as council in order to facilitate a lot of the background between the committees and the councils, is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing?
And Trevor, if I could just add to that, that the reason, or the CAOs obviously know what their council are talking about and what they're looking for ahead of time. You guys are aware of where North Huron wants to go, and you're aware of where Morris Terminal wants to go. So you guys can start narrowing down that field and having those discussions, and then the hard discussions will come before these committees. But it's not a matter of just checking off 14 boxes and let's all lovey-dovey and move forward. We have to come to some rash agreements with it. But yes, I'm for it.
Is that?
Absolutely, I think staff should be taking the lead.
Okay, so from that, we had so I guess from from an agenda perspective, I think North Huron has had some examples of agreements from other municipalities that Reed Bailey would like to present to Morris Terminer.
Yes, I would. Did you guys get a copy when you came in? Or do I have it? I have it here. So again, Jamie, going back to 8 years ago when I was on council, I presented what other places are doing. Just cleaned it. No, that's, oh, sorry. Sorry. So I did a few of these. This is just a one-pager, is it, Wayne? Oh, backside, okay. So this is just a few examples of what's going on. So we don't have to invent the wheel, is what I'm saying. This is examples of what other communities are doing, and I would like you folks to take a good hard look at it. And we will have discussions on it, I'm sure, our next meeting. But this is what North Huron have been looking at. And we'd like you to have a glance at it. Again, we're not inventing the wheel. We're just looking at what's going on around, and I would like to have a discussion about this at the next meeting. Today is just a setup meeting.
Bernie, are these recent ones or how long?
This is 2014.
2000?
Yep, and the only one that's changed is I gave Hanover West Gray a call, and Dwayne has made the changes into it. 2014, when we had this information, West Gray and Hanover could not come to a deal. I was talking to the CAO today, and he tells me that West Gray and Hanover could not make a deal, and Brockton and Hanover could not make a deal for Hanover to supply water. So 5 years later, West Gray still does not have any hookups, and Hanover is not interested in talking to them. And Brockton's the same way. At the Brockton side of Hanover, what had happened is there was some establishments there that were put in place many, many years ago, and therefore they continued to give the water to them. But Hanover and West Gray since 2015 have not even had a conversation. They just can't seem to get off the map about how important it is to work together.
So I have a question, what about that Walmart out there that got some West Gray, did they put their own water in, I guess?
Yeah, they had to pay Hanover, I believe it was. So the actual, and I think that also happens in Godrich where
The developer
the
bought it?
developer came in and said, I'm going to do this, and that's all there is to it. And they went ahead and said, in order to develop this, we will pay the town. And they came to, and I have no idea what the agreement is between the developers.
So it's a developer in the town rather than West?
Yeah, because the town just said, no, we're not interested.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And I don't know where the dividing line is in Hanover. I do know I had a conversation with Jim again about, it was Jim, about the one in Godrich, and that's what he told me. He said the developer, the developer paid, it just said, you guys, I don't have time for you to argue, we'll just pay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would ask through you, Deputy Reese, is that if we could have copies of the actual agreements. There's no way that we can, go through this list. We need the context that goes with what's worded there. I need the actual agreements so we can actually read them and get the context of what the intent is. And
So you may as well have your CEO get those as ours, because one or the other is going to get it. Well, you guys worked at it. Okay, you guys worked at it, so you know what the request is. Because obviously we don't have this on file. This is something that was sent to me 4 years and 8 years ago.
Yeah, sorry.
I was just wondering, what is it that you see that's wrong with the agreement we have now? Like, what is it that you want changed in it? Like, if we don't know what you want changed in it, why are we going through meetings to change something that's...
So I can tell you right now that when I was on council before, we sat down and we agreed upon a 70-30 split in taxes for the hookups. So the way we looked at that at the time with Paul and myself, Neil and John Smuck, I believe, was if you take that field that Cover All is sitting on, Brightspan is sitting on, and I'm not a farmer, but I think you get about $600 an acre on taxes if it's farmland and you're planting wheat. And farmers in this room can tell me whether I'm right or wrong on that. You get $600. When you put the Brightspan on there, you get $16,000 tax relief. But according to Ontario law, you can't put that there unless you hook up to municipal water and sewer. So you're hooking into our water and sewer, you're benefiting all that taxes, and we're simply asking to share that because it's our water and sewer system.
So it's not benefiting Wingham at all?
Not if it's costing us money, no. And I'm gonna give you an example. I'll give you an example. For
But
instance,
it's not employing anyone in Wingham? It's not benefiting you that way?
give me 10 people right now, even though that live and really work there. So they can live in Cape Cod. I could say the same thing about they live in Teeswater. They live anywhere else, right? So an example would be, an example that's going on right now, is we have a tower that has to be replaced at $8 million. But you know there's no growth in Wingham because Morris Turnberry surrounds us. So the growth and the wear on that tank isn't coming from North Huron. We're just doing everything we've done for 40 years. So my understanding is, I'm not sure if it was the CAO or the past CAO, our CAO went over and said, we're gonna have to spend $8 million on a water tank. Could you help us? Because you need this to get that $16 million worth of tax relief. for hooking into our water, and I believe we were offered $8,000.
Oh, I never heard anything of it, so.
Yeah. So these are the kind of things, Sharon, that we need to talk about and understand that it benefits both of us if we both share in the costing as well as the receiving of the taxes. In this agreement now that we have, that you're holding up, we have agreed, they took the 70-30 split out, and we have agreed that we would have a conversation, as they did in the days past, about anytime there's a hookup, let's have a conversation about Morris Turnberry will give us more money on a conversation like this, based on the hookup and the taxes you're getting in. The problem is, from that time till now, there's been 6 hookups. But again, nobody has gone back and had those conversations. So we have willingly give you the 6 hookups, but the conversation never took place about giving us something in return, as you do for the building we're sitting in, which you did years ago. Again, going back to what Jamie says, it's because it's cumbersome, and it's something that you gotta remember to do, and counselors change positions, staff change positions, and it gets lost along the way. So all of a sudden now we're gonna say, well, we have 6 of them now that have been hooked up, now we have to have that conversation. It's just not a good way of doing business, right? So when you look at that example alone, I want that to lead into the conversations we have. So we did have a 30-70 split, and we went back, and the council went back to let's have a conversation each time, but the conversation never took place, just like we didn't realize this became expired and we didn't even know. So that's the reason behind that. But that's a conversation we need to have, I don't want to have. I don't think we should get into the nitty-gritty today.
I don't know if the conversation took place or not, so I
Yeah.
can't speak on that, so.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Trevor?
Sorry, Jim, yes?
Isn't water, isn't it supposed to be self-sufficient?
Rebuild.
So, yes, and there's about $1 billion worth of infrastructure in Wingham in the last 100 years that Wingham Ward paid for, just using Wingham as an example. Then you guys come along and you want to say just the water rates. The water rate has only been in effect, I have no idea, let's say 10 years. That water, that I think I was on council when we decided to start charging for that. So that's only been around for 10 years. So we don't have $1 billion to replace everything that could go wrong. And I think
I
every
think
time,
a lot of that is paid by the province also.
it doesn't matter who paid for it.
Yeah, I think you're saying that the Wingham ratepayers paid for it, the province paid for it.
So-
I guess I'm getting back at, have you got any reserves put in for this water tower, like out of your water
So
users?
that was part of the conversation between the 2 CAOs, and that $300,000 or $3 million what we have is for all of Blythe, Belgrave, and Wingham. And your CEO said, no, you use all that money first. Oh, now you only need $8,000 more. So if we dig up, Jim, you see one street being dug up in front of a house, that's $40,000. So as Jim Ginn said at county, the $13 million we have sitting aside for county really doesn't cover much. You know, so we have to have that concern that we're not saying at this stage of the game, the ratepayers are paying, but they can't pay enough to keep it up if something goes wrong. And the infrastructure that we're worried about, like the North Trunk, right, is going to be a $3 to $8 million hit. If the trunk goes down in the north, nobody's flushing a toilet at the coverall, at the bright span or the foundry, anything, because that trunk feeds everything. So that's our concern, right? So we need to sit down and have these discussions, and this is why our staff have to have these discussions ahead of time, saying, no, when we come to council, here's some legitimate reasons why we need to talk about this, right? So.
Mayor Heffer, did you have something?
Councilor Nealman's did cover it, I'll reiterate the point that water systems, sewage systems are intended to be user-pay systems. And he did make a fair point, the province kicked in most of the money at the time those were put in. I think it was at a 70% level, if I recall what I've read in the past. The tax split, those conversations have come around before, and always concerned when there's a tax split. I'm not even sure the legalities of the ability to do that. Certainly some concern with splitting taxes. And there has been discussion in the past about back to the user pay and the amounts collected. Surely there's got to be something in reserves after all these years of collecting the rates that are being collected. And I guess I'm having a hard time being expected to pay at both ends of a service. If we're dealing with a user pay system, then the fees are supposed to cover and maintain that system. And to come in at the other end of that service provision and ask for a tax split, I think that needs to be explained to me a lot better, because I'm still not just quite understanding how that can be done. But thank you for answering the question. You asked what you wanted, you gave us the answer. I appreciate it.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments as it relates to the information that I know Reed Bailey has mentioned that this can go back and be talked about, and we'll be, Trevor and Dwayne will talk about how to get those agreements so that each municipality can review those agreements in more detail as it relates to the content and figure out how those can be related into our agreement if so discussion is. Sorry. Deputy
One
Chair.
thing I would like to see though is that this is only water and sewer agreement we're working on. If we want to combine some of the other agreements later on, we could talk about that. But for now, water and sewer should be separate from anything.
So, in saying that, it's come up a couple of times, is that something that Reed Bailey here on North Huron can agree to?
Let's get a few meetings in and see how things go.
I just
I
don't
don't
see
want
them
to-
wasting their time coming up with an agreement or things that combine everything when we're not, when we want to do just one of them.
Yeah, but I was just, that's all I'm suggesting is that if on here we have agreement with fire hydrants, water and sewer. We have agreements with, there's 3 of them here that are agreements, water suppression. That's water, so I'm
It's
not
still
sure.
water.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about anything else, let's get through this one.
Okay, so what I'm hearing though is this cross-border services agreement will discuss only the agreements that relate to water and sewer and combining those agreements into one. Is that consensus across the table here?
Yep. And could I just throw something else out there? This is a great time to have this conversation. A great time to have this conversation. Because right now we're looking at $8 million for a new tank, which we supply you folks with. I'm wondering if you might want to consider, and this is just Reed Bailey speaking, I've never talked to my council about this, it would have to go before one of our councilors. I'm wondering if Morris Turnberry would be interested in putting the tank up. And then we wouldn't have to spend the $8 million on ours, and then we could pay you 1.5 times the rate. Again, just throwing that out there, because it just so happens we have to do the tank right now. So we could reverse roles. It was okay with you guys, it would be okay with us. And having said that, that's a big leap forward, and that would really be tying our 2 communities together as really getting along to take that step. So keep that in mind, think that out. As I said, at an $8 million for North Huron right now with everything we've got going on, and a $3 to $8 million North Trunk, that may help us out. Really great, because then we'd have the money towards the North Trunk, and everybody up at West Cass and Brightspan can keep flushing the toilets. But this, again, I would like the 2 CEOs to have a
Well, we could go with another option, we could each do our own.
each of your own. Oh, tank. Yeah, there's that possibility. Yeah, let the CEOs talk about it, and, yeah,
Another option.
yeah.
This tank that you're talking about, it has to be replaced right away.
I don't think so. I think we're doing the numbers now. Dwayne, could you maybe answer that?
We're at the point that we have to do something very soon.
Yeah. The tank has been repaired and repaired and repaired and repaired. Which brings us to another situation. With the water system, we as councillors of North Huron actually have to personally guarantee the safety of the water, or we're personally liable. We have to look at our cross-border agreement when it walks over and goes into Morris Turnbury, that maybe the council should also, of Morris Turnbury, should also be personally responsible, because now we're getting into a situation where Greens have a well, and if they hook into our water system, and then all of a sudden something goes wrong, we don't know if it's his well because it was too close to a septic, or, you know what I mean? I'm not a farmer, I don't claim to be, but we have some concern at our council about that something could happen on your side of it, but we at North Huron are responsible for it personally.
Yeah.
And that's by Ontario law. That is, you have no choice. Whether it's Listowel, Wingham, or Toronto, when you become a council, you're responsible because of the water tragedy. You are responsible to make sure that it is kept up.
But
I
you
guess
can't
one of the
have just found out that you needed the water tank.
This is going on.
This isn't just like yesterday it came up.
No.
So have they not been putting money away for this?
He just talked about that. We have the amount of money that we collect, which costs me $20 every time I get a water bill, goes towards that. And I said about the county, said the same thing. It sounds like a lot of money to a person that's paying it, but it only added up to, I'm not sure what we have in reserves, but we don't have enough to cover it. It's millions of dollars to do this, yeah. And we're only collecting $20 from each one of the residents, each one of the households. But then we're in a problem because North Huron has no place to bill, so we can't get more than $20, right? But we have to replace it. A lot of us smaller communities are facing this, whether it's plow trucks or what it is, right? We still have the same amount of people we've always had, but my dad bought a truck for $40,000. I'm told those tractor trailers are running out at $400,000 now in my lifetime. You're still driving that same load of milk down the street, right, Sharon? So how do you justify that big cost? But you have no choice. That is the cost, right? So the answer is we have been saving, but that savings also got used last year. $250,000 of that savings got used last year to help you extend the Arthur Street so that Brightspan could be there. So it
I
was
think
a
you better
five.
look into that, Uncle.
Am I right or wrong on that? It was a $500,000 project.
I don't know the numbers off the top.
Okay.
It maybe is, but I think that was a shared.
Yes, yeah, that's what I'm
It
saying.
wasn't that you paid us.
No, no.
We shared that project.
No, that's what I'm saying. $250,000 of the money that's there for the water was used for our half of that. That's what it's for. It's for doing that, right? So we're using the money at the same. It's not like we can keep storing the money and then one day say, we have a water tank. We have to still dig the streets up, replace the things that are broken, put the new streets in. Arthur Street's a perfect example. We shared the cost of that, $250,000 a piece, right? And that came out of our water and sewer money. And you folks, I believe, had to take it out of taxes because you don't have that ability to charge somebody for that water, right?
That's correct.
So yeah, so that come right out of your bottom line. And
Councillor Neil, sorry.
And maybe there's another thing we could look at is somehow work that in, that we could work that together, that you have something that's funding some of this stuff as well as taxes.
Councillor Neil.
Just off the, we have a cottage at Grand Bend and we're in Lambton Shores there. They're putting in new water lines, we got an increase, a fairly substantial increase in our water. Have your rates kept up? Like, I realize you don't want to pay more money, but have your rates kept up with other municipalities? I have no idea.
So we,
Like, maybe you're not charging enough, are you, or
so
not?
our 5-year water renewal, like our rates, I think are to be renewed next year, I believe.
Yes.
So
It's just like in Belgrade, we're going to do that because we're trying to put reserves in that Belgrade water system in case you have to dig a well or put the pumps in and everything. So every year we've had to have an increase almost to keep up with that. I just wondered if you were doing the same thing. I realize it's nice to the ratepayers to give them cheap water, but again, then you run into this problem where you don't have enough money at the end.
The water rates were done 5 years ago, and they're up for renewal again, and I believe it's next year.
Okay, yeah.
So, well, we're looking at the water rates.
Yeah, that's
Similar.
what they do in Hampton Shores, because I'm sure they got upgrades coming up there, and that's why they increased it substantially.
Mayor Everett?
Yeah, I've used a few points and quite a bit of conversation has come along the way, so I'm just going to address them as I was making notes as we went. So you may have to stretch your memories a bit to go back to the conversation where this is relevant. What's come up a couple of times is the next meeting and many more meetings. I'm a little, just want to put the brakes on that. And I'm hoping with the direction given for staff to be the lead on this, that we can shortlist our meetings to a point where we're only meeting where we're sitting down to get some details dealt with. So just a point I wanted to make, that I don't want to turn this into a committee that needs to keep meeting over and over again. I'm going to throw something out for you, Reeve Bailey. I'd appreciate it if you bring an idea forward, if you've already used your own council as a sounding board, so that, I don't want to start going down garden paths that may not be the direction that's useful for our discussions. And you throw out the two, maybe we build a tank. I would much rather if kind of an outside the box idea comes forward, that you've already sounded that idea off your council, so that you are, if that's the council direction, then there's an idea to work with. But I just don't want to get caught up on something popping up here, something popping up there, and it's actually not going to take us down the road, it's where we're heading. And just one point I did want to make mention, this goes back a bit in our conversation. There's already been a boundary adjustment. You mentioned Wingham not able to grow, and I'm going to go back, and this is before my time on council, but there was a boundary adjustment made, and you refer to now as the A2A project, and that was, I believe, 110 acres that Morris Turnberry gave to North Huron so that the town of Wingham could expand. And my understanding is there's approximately opportunity for 400 houses in that parcel. And I think there's about 800 houses in Wingham now. So I think that was a very, very significant boundary adjustment that has been made. And I just wanted to bring that up. There has been things done to try and help the situation so that you weren't landlocked. And I just wanted to make mention, I don't know if everybody in the room is aware of that, but there was a 110 acre boundary adjustment done at one time so that Wingham could grow and not remain stagnant. So just a point I wanted to make clear.
Bill?
Thank you, Jamie. And yes, again, anything that I put forward is not reinventing the wheel. It's been done. We've worked together in the past. We'll work together in the future, and we can work together now. That's anything I brought forward is something that has happened and that has happened, whether it's here or somewhere else.
Okay, is there anything else that anybody wishes to communicate tonight under the other business stuff?
I would like to mention, and I know this has been around your council, I would like to mention that we're going to continue our agreement, even though it's null and void as is, because you folks are willing to step at the table and talk with us. You don't have it. Okay? We will work a deal out. I mean, I don't see how we couldn't work. So even though the deal that we have now is null and void as of last Sunday, we're not concerned with that. On a gentleman, gentlelady's agreement, make sure I do that politically correct, we're going to continue to work together, okay?
Appreciate hearing that. Thank you.
Okay, so next steps, I've heard, so let me just, as the chair, let me just formulate what I've heard, just so we make sure that we're all on the same page before we leave here tonight. So next steps is the CAOs are going to take the lead as it relates to information that's going to be the meat, I would say, and potatoes of the agreement, based on information they get from each council as it relates to how they would like to see the agreement. Once that discussion has had between both staffs and they've come to somewhere where they're not sure on the direction of each council and how they would so choose, then that agreement or the pieces of that agreement would come back to this table for those discussions. And then they would go back and then whatever agreements need to be talked about with either councils, then they would go from this table back to the councils for ratification. Is that what I'm hearing based on the discussions?
Yeah, except for Jamie mentioned that I should go to my council about the tank.
That was the example you used,
Yeah.
Reed Bailey. I just would appreciate, I think it would more fine tune our discussions if it's not out of the box ideas, if it's ideas that have already been pre-discussed at your council level, and it's an idea that they wish to bring forward.
Well, at this point, our committee is going to be doing the negotiating for our council. When we get down to serious business, then we'll be going, and I'm sure as you will too, then we'll be meeting with our council. But I don't see having a new camera unless these two folks with me want to have one every time we have a discussion. I think that they have given us permission to do the negotiations, and we'll move forward. Yeah, let's get down to some serious business. I have no problem with that.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay? Okay, so if there's no other discussion, I'd take a motion to adjourn at 7 o'clock. Reed Bailey moves, Deputy Mayor Zinn seconds. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you very much.